So, folks, we've looked at our creating our graphs now. You guys have worked hard on that. You've done your activities here, and you should have for the little basketball challenge. You should have a graph that looks something like this. For your tongue twisters, your graph might look something like that. And our goal here is to look at okay, now that we know what our graphs look like, and we have our data plotted on the graph, can we somehow describe the relationship between the two things? And there's really three ways that we do that. The main word that we're going to use here is the word correlation. And you're going to see me kind of talk about it here in a second. But what we're looking at here is we can generally see that as the number of words increases, right, as the number of words goes up, the amount of time it takes us to say those tongue twisters also increases. So what happens is you get this kind of line that looks something like that. Obviously, I'm not hitting every single point, but you have a line that, as in general, from left to right, it's increasing. Okay, so that's actually something that we can classify, and what that's called is that's called a positive because as we increase from right to left, we're also increasing on the y-axis. So that's called a positive correlation. So just write that right there on your graph for the tongue twisters. That's a positive correlation. All right. So moving from left to right, your graph is increasing. Now, what happened though when we looked at the graph of as the distance increased, as the distance away from the from the bowl increased, what happened to the number of shots that we made, right? As the distance increased, the number of shots that we made actually went down, right? So that makes sense because the further away you are, the fewer shots you're probably going to make. But what that's called is, again, that's a type of correlation. But what's happening is we're moving from left to right, and our data in general is moving in the downward direction. So what that's called a negative correlation. So I would go ahead and write that as well on your graph for your little basketball activity. Okay, so we have a negative correlation for the shots made because as our distance increases, the number of shots we make decreases. So let's kind of bring all that together and summarize what's going on here. Really, what we have is three different types. We have a positive correlation, like we discussed, we have a negative correlation, and then we also have this last example of, well, if there's no general relationship at all, then we call that no correlation. There's no relationship between the two. So, very quickly with your neighbor, see if you can identify which one each of these six graphs is. Should be pretty quick and pretty easy, but see if you can identify each one as positive, negative, or no correlation at all. Go ahead and press pause and make that happen. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to identify all the positive ones first. So positive ones, hopefully you're noticing that this is a big positive one. As we go from left to right, we're increasing. And this is a big positive one. Not as strong, not as a good relationship. The number 4 was a little bit better than that, but number 3 is still a positive relationship. All right, how about the negative ones? Tell your neighbor which ones were the negative ones. Hopefully you ended up with this is definitely a negative relationship. There's a clearly it's clearly going down as we move from left to right. And then I would also say that this one's a negative relationship because it's also moving down. Once again, maybe not quite as obvious, but it is definitely moving in the downward direction. These last two, number 1 and number 6, really I can't see any type of correlation there at all. So we can't give this any kind of classification. The only way we can classify this is by saying, hey, this really doesn't have any correlation. So go ahead and write on those ones, no correlation. So very important that we are able to classify our types of correlation. That's a significant piece. And what you're going to learn here in a little bit tomorrow is there's actually a number that measures that. And so we're going to learn about that number moving forward in the unit. So, what I want you to do is take a brief moment to go ahead and graph these points here, and then we're going to discuss what type of correlation it is. So, you're going to definitely have to click pause on the video as you graph the points. But just to quickly summarize what's going on, we're trying to see if the number of hours you sleep before a test changes the grade that you're going to get on that test. So you can see the number of hours we slept. So just an example here would be maybe you sleep 6 hours, you get a 76. Maybe you sleep 4 hours and you get a 60, right? So there are different data points here that we want you to graph, and then we're going to see if there is any type of correlation we can kind of conclude. So press pause and go ahead and try that out. All right, so I'm just going to very quickly graph these as well. 883 doesn't have to be perfect, guys, but 83 is going to be somewhere around here. 786 is going to be somewhere right around there. 774 is going to be right about here. 888 is going to be right about here. 676 is going to be about there. 563 is going to be just about here. 790, so come back over here. 790 is going to be over there. 4, go back down to 4 and 60. 460 is right there. 989, so right about here. And then 781, so 781. So what do you think? Looking at those points, what type of correlation, what type of correlation would you say this graph has? Tell your neighbor real quick. All right, so hopefully you can definitely see that in general, our graph is definitely rising from left to right. It's definitely increasing. So if we were to classify this, this would definitely be a positive correlation. A positive correlation. So what I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to interpret that though. What does it mean in words with the context of what we're talking about? What does a positive correlation really mean? So try to put this into words. I'll kind of give you the setup here. You want to kind of fill in the blank as we say, as the number of hours something, the grade we get in our test, something else. So hopefully you're seeing what your kind of conclusion is as the number of hours slept increases, there's the keyword, increases, the grade also does what? The grade also increases. That's what it means to have a positive correlation. That as the number of hours we sleep increases, the number of the grade on our test is also going to increase. It's very important that not only can you identify that it's a positive correlation, but that you can also identify what that means in the context of the problem. So we're going to keep practicing that for the rest of class today. Here again, we have another graph for you to go ahead and graph. So press pause and start graphing. This one is all about the temperature outside and the amount of water we're consuming. Okay, so there's a temperature outside and the amount of water that is consumed. So go ahead and graph these and see if we can see what type of relationship exists. Okay, so be careful here. This one's a little confusing. Notice that water consumption is on the bottom and temperature is on the left. So this is really your x coordinate and these are really your y coordinates. I don't really like the way that this table was created. I would have switched these two, but let's see what's happening. What they're trying to figure out is whether or not the amount of water we consume is affected by the temperature. So take a few more seconds if you need to and go ahead and graph this one. And then I'm going to come back to you and help you figure it out. Best of luck.